My mother-in-law mocked my failed business at Thanksgiving, but I quietly bought her dream vacation home. The day I closed my business was a Wednesday. I remember because it was raining, the kind of steady downpour that seems to mock your mood. I stood in the empty office space that had been evergreen marketing for the past 4 years, staring at the blank walls where our mission statement once hung proudly. My fingers traced the outline where the logo used to be, a simple green leaf with the tagline, "Growing Your Brand." Now it was just a slightly lighter rectangle on the faded paint. I wasn't sad. Not exactly. I was relieved. Exhausted, but relieved. What had started as a dream partnership with 2 college friends had devolved into a nightmare of creative differences, financial disputes, and the kind of passive-aggressive toxicity that makes you dread Monday mornings. The business wasn't failing. We were actually turning a decent profit, but I was failing within it. My soul was being crushed one client meeting at a time. So I made the decision to walk away. A strategic retreat, not a surrender. At least, that's how I saw it. My family saw it differently, especially my in-laws. Well, Denise said, swirling her Pinot Noir at the first family dinner after the news broke. She always did that, swirled her wine like she was at some Napa Valley tasting instead of her suburban dining room in New Jersey. Another entrepreneur bites the dust. Statistics don't lie, do they, dear? My husband, Mark, squeezed my knee under the table. Mom, it's more complicated than that. Sophia made the right choice for herself. Of course she did, Denise replied with a smile that never reached her eyes. And now you can support her while she figures things out. That was the first cut, but far from the deepest. Over the next few weeks, the comments became less veiled. At Sunday brunch, she'd pat my hand and say, "It's not your fault, dear." Not everyone has that instinct for business. At her book club, which unfortunately included several of my friends, she reportedly said, "My daughter-in-law is taking a break from the rat race. Some women just aren't built for that kind of pressure." Each remark was delivered with a sympathetic smile and a tilt of her perfectly highlighted head. Denise had worked as an executive assistant at the same accounting firm for 30 years, a fact she mentioned whenever my former business came up. Stability is underrated, she'd say. I never had to worry about where my next paycheck was coming from. Mark tried to run interference, but his mother was relentless. She had a way of turning every conversation back to my situation, as she called it. "Sophia, have you considered going back to school?" she asked one evening over pot roast, her signature dish that she knew I couldn't replicate despite numerous attempts. Marketing is so competitive these days. Maybe something in healthcare? There's always demand there. "I'm exploring my options," I said, the same vague response I'd been giving everyone. "Smart," she nodded, cutting her meat with surgical precision. "Better to take your time than jump into another mishap." The worst came at her annual Labor Day barbecue. I was helping in the kitchen, slicing tomatoes for the burgers, when I overheard her talking to her sister in the pantry. "I tried to warn Mark before they got married," she whispered, unaware that I was just around the corner. I said, "Creative types are dreamers, not doers." Now look, 3 years in, and her business is kaput. You know what she majored in? Art history. I mean, really, what did she expect? Her sister murmured something I couldn't hear. "Exactly," Denise continued. "You should have stuck to something stable, dear. Like being a wife." That's what I told her last week. She just smiled that vacant smile of hers. I gripped the knife tighter, the tomato juice sticky between my fingers. For a moment, I considered walking into that pantry and telling her exactly what I thought of her stable life and her helpful advice. But I didn't. I quietly finished slicing the tomatoes and arranged them on the serving platter with mechanical precision. That night, as Mark and I drove home, he noticed my silence. "You okay? You barely said 2 words all evening." I stared out the window at the passing streetlights. "Your mother thinks I should focus on being a better wife instead of trying to be a businesswoman." Mark's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. "She said that to you?" "Not directly. I overheard her talking to Aunt Linda." He sighed heavily. "Soph, I'm sorry. You know she's from a different generation. In her mind, she's actually trying to be helpful." I turned to look at him, his profile illuminated by the dashboard lights. "Do you think I failed?" "God, no," he said without hesitation. "You made a smart decision to get out of a toxic situation. That's not failure. That's self-preservation." I nodded, returning my gaze to the window. "How would you feel if I started something new? Something completely different?" "I'd support you 100%. You know that." I smiled faintly. "And if I kept it quiet for a while? Just until I got my footing?" He reached over and took my hand. "Whatever you need. My mother's opinion doesn't matter." But it did matter. Not because I valued it, but because I was tired of the smug looks, the backhanded compliments, the thinly veiled contempt. I was tired of being the family's cautionary tale. 2 days later, I registered a new LLC under a name that had nothing to do with me or my previous business. I rented a desk at a co-working space 30 minutes away, in a town where no one knew me. I reconnected with former clients who had always appreciated my work, separate from my partners. I took out a small business loan using our investment property as collateral, something Mark knew about but not the full amount. And I started again, this time on my terms. Meanwhile, at every family gathering, Denise continued her commentary. She'd introduced me to her friends as Mark's wife. She used to have a marketing agency. She'd forward me job listings for entry-level positions with notes like, "Just to get you back on your feet." When Mark got a small promotion at work, she threw an impromptu dinner and toasted to the breadwinner of the family. Through it all, I smiled. I nodded. I thanked her for her concern. And I worked harder than I'd ever worked in my life, building something new in secret while the world, or at least my small corner of it, believed I had failed. What Denise and everyone else didn't know was that I'd already landed 2 major international clients. They didn't know that I was developing a niche in luxury brand marketing that my former partners had always dismissed as too specialized. They didn't know that I was working 18-hour days, sometimes falling asleep at my laptop, driven by a combination of passion and spite that proved to be remarkably effective fuel. They didn't know because I didn't tell them. Not yet. The satisfaction of silence was too sweet to surrender. And all the while, Denise kept talking about her dream vacation home in Cape May, the one she'd been saving for since before Mark was born. She showed everyone pictures from real estate listings, describing the porch where she'd drink her morning coffee, the kitchen where she'd host family gatherings, the beach where her future grandchildren would build sandcastles. "It's all about planning," she'd say pointedly in my direction. "Setting realistic goals and sticking to them." I just smiled and passed the potatoes. My new company, Eclipse Marketing Solutions, operated in complete shadow. I chose the name deliberately, something powerful emerging from darkness. The first client came through an old college friend who ran a luxury watch brand in Switzerland. The second was a high-end spa chain expanding across Europe. By month 3, I was flying to Milan for meetings while telling my family I was taking a class in New York. The co-working space became my sanctuary. No family photos on my desk. No personal touches. Nothing that connected Eclipse to Sophia Bennett, failed entrepreneur. I was ruthlessly professional, focused only on results. When potential clients asked about my background, I simply said I had previous experience in boutique marketing and then redirected the conversation to their needs. I signed NDAs with every client, making confidentiality not just a policy, but a cornerstone of my brand. Discreet excellence became my unspoken motto. Clients appreciated that their strategies wouldn't end up as case studies plastered across social media, a practice my former partners had insisted on despite my objections. One Tuesday morning, 6 months into my secret venture, I received an email that changed everything. A luxury resort developer in Dubai needed a complete brand strategy for their new line of exclusive properties. The contract was worth more than Evergreen had made in its entire existence. I worked for 72 hours straight, subsisting on espresso and determination. When I finally sent the proposal, I closed my laptop and cried, not from exhaustion, but from a profound realization. I was thriving in the shadows. They signed the contract the following week. Just like that, Eclipse became a 7-figure business. That same evening, Mark and I attended dinner at Denise's house. She was in particularly fine form, having just returned from a realtor's open house in Cape May. "The market's heating up," she announced, passing around her phone with pictures of a stunning coastal property. "My dream house just listed, but it's still out of reach. Another 5 years of saving, I think." The home was admittedly beautiful, a weathered gray Cape Cod with blue shutters, perched on a dune overlooking the Atlantic. Wide porches wrapped around both levels, and floor-to-ceiling windows captured the ocean view from every angle. "I've had my eye on this neighborhood for 20 years, Denise continued. "Every vacation, I drive by these houses and imagine myself rocking on that porch, watching the sunrise." She sighed dramatically. "That's what planning gets you, closer to your dream, year by year." She looked directly at me. "Maybe someday you'll understand the value of patience and persistence, dear." Under the table, Mark's hand found mine, an automatic reflex whenever his mother started. But this time, I gave him a genuine smile. For the first time, her barbs couldn't penetrate. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I opened my laptop and looked up the Cape May property. The asking price was steep, but not impossible, not anymore. I bookmarked the listing and closed my computer, a plan forming in my mind. The following months became a blur of international calls, strategy sessions, and quiet victories. I expanded my team to 5 people, all remote, all bound by strict confidentiality agreements. None knew my full story. To them, I was simply the founder of a successful marketing agency, not someone rebuilding from ashes. My husband noticed changes, new clothes, a quiet confidence, fewer nights of coming home emotionally drained. When he asked, I shared only pieces of the truth, that I was consulting, that things were going well, that I preferred to keep it low-key for now. "Just until I'm ready," I told him. "I don't want the pressure of everyone's opinions." He understood without fully understanding. Mark had always respected my independence, even when he didn't comprehend my motivations. That respect was why I'd fallen in love with him, despite his family. Meanwhile, Denise's comments continued. At Mark's birthday dinner, she raised a toast to my successful son and his supportive wife. At a family reunion, she introduced me to distant relatives as someone who tried her hand at business, but found it wasn't her calling. I let her talk. I let everyone believe what they wanted. In private, I was methodically building an empire that would eclipse anything they could imagine. At the 18-month mark, Eclipse Marketing Solutions had 23 international clients, a virtual team of 15 specialists, and revenues that made my accountant's eyes widen. I was working smarter, delegating effectively, and focusing on strategy rather than minutiae. And I still hadn't told a soul. Not even when I contacted the real estate agent about the Cape May property. Not even when I scheduled a private viewing. Not even when I made an offer under my company's name. Silence had become my superpower. And revenge, it turned out, was best served not just cold, but unexpected. November arrived with a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Thanksgiving at Denise's house was a tradition as immutable as the tides, and about as pleasant as being caught in a riptide. This year, however, I approached it with an unfamiliar sense of calm. The day before Thanksgiving, I received the email I'd been waiting for. The Cape May property was mine. The closing was complete, the deed transferred. I forwarded the confirmation to my lawyer, then deleted all evidence from my phone. Timing, as they say in business, is everything. Denise's home smelled of sage, butter, and superiority when we arrived. She greeted Mark with a warm embrace and me with an air kiss that never quite connected. "Sophia, you look rested," she said, appraising my outfit, a simple but expensive cashmere sweater I'd purchased in Milan. "Unemployment must agree with you." I smiled. "I keep busy." "I'm sure you do," she replied, patting my arm. "The appetizers are in the living room. I made your favorite stuffed mushrooms. I know how you love simple pleasures." The house was full of Denise's people, her sister and brother-in-law, cousins from her side, and friends she'd known since high school. My allies were limited to Mark and his younger sister Emily, who had always found her mother's perfectionism as exhausting as I did. I helped arrange flowers and fold napkins into elaborate swans while Denise narrated her cooking process to anyone within earshot. The secret to my turkey is the brine, 3 days, not just overnight like those celebrity chefs recommend. Some things can't be rushed. She looked pointedly in my direction. That's what I always tell Mark. Good things come to those who wait and work consistently, not those who jump from one thing to another. I silently counted to 10 in Italian, a habit I developed during conference calls with my Milan clients. When we finally gathered around the dining table, I found myself seated directly across from Denise, a strategic placement that ensured I couldn't avoid her gaze, or she mine. The turkey arrived on a silver platter that had belonged to her grandmother, a fact she mentioned annually. "Before we eat," Denise announced, raising her wine glass, "I'd like to say how thankful I am that we're all here together. Family is what matters most, especially in difficult times." She looked around the table, her gaze lingering on me. Some of us have faced setbacks this year, but that's what family is for, to catch you when you fall. Several heads nodded in sympathy. I took a long sip of wine. "I'm especially grateful for my son's resilience," she continued. "Mark has really stepped up, showing what real success looks like: dedication, persistence, stability." Mark shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, can we just eat?" "Of course, darling. I'm just expressing gratitude. That's what today is about." The food was passed around, plates were filled, and conversation flowed like the overpriced wine Denise had selected. I contributed minimally, answering direct questions with pleasant but brief responses. Halfway through the meal, Denise's sister asked about my job situation. Before I could answer, Denise interjected. "Sophia's taking some time to reevaluate. Aren't you, dear? Some people just aren't cut out for business, and that's perfectly fine. We can't all be entrepreneurs." "That's right," I said quietly. "Some of us are better suited to other things." Denise nodded vigorously, missing my subtle smile. "Exactly. There's no shame in recognizing your limitations. In fact, it's wise." "Speaking of recognizing things," her sister said, "did you hear back about that Cape May property? The one with the wraparound porch?" Denise's face lit up, momentarily forgetting her mission to politely eviscerate me. "I called the agent yesterday. It's still on the market, but there's been serious interest." She sighed. "If only I'd started saving 10 years earlier." "It's your dream home," her sister sympathized. "It really is," Denise agreed. "I've already planned where each piece of furniture would go. The antique rocker would sit perfectly in the east corner of the porch, catching the morning light." She pulled out her phone, bringing up photos to pass around the table. "Look at that view. I'd have my coffee there every morning, watching the waves." When the phone reached me, I studied the images I'd already committed to memory during my private tour last week. "It's beautiful," I said truthfully. "Some dreams are worth waiting for," Denise said, reaching for her wine glass. "But being delusional isn't the same as being driven." She raised her glass. "To real success stories in the family." Everyone raised their glasses. Under the table, Mark's grip on my hand tightened to the point of pain. I squeezed back reassuringly. "To success," I echoed, meeting Denise's gaze over the rim of my glass. "However it comes." After dinner, as dessert was being prepared, I stepped outside for some air. The night was clear and cold, stars pricking through the darkness like distant possibilities. I pulled out my phone and sent a brief text to my assistant. "Proceed with phase 2. The response came immediately. "All set for Friday." I slipped the phone back into my pocket, a small smile playing at my lips. 2 more days. 2 more days of nodding and smiling, and playing the role they all expected. When I returned inside, Denise was holding court in the living room, describing her plans for Christmas dinner. "I'm thinking of trying something new this year. Sometimes tradition needs a shake-up, doesn't it, Sophia?" "Absolutely," I replied, settling next to Mark on the sofa. "Sometimes the most unexpected changes lead to the best outcomes." She had no idea how right I was. The day after Thanksgiving passed in a blur of leftovers and football games. I made my excuses early, claiming a headache, and spent the evening finalizing details with the property manager in Cape May. The house needed to be perfect. Every curtain hung, every light working, every piece of furniture precisely placed. By Saturday morning, my plan was ready. I sent a group text to the entire family. Small gathering today at 2 p.m. Address to follow. Trust me, it's worth the drive. I included a photo of the ocean, just a sliver of blue horizon, enough to pique curiosity without revealing too much. Mark looked over my shoulder as I sent it. Are you finally going to tell me what's going on? I kissed him lightly. Just trust me a little longer. His eyes searched mine. This is about my mother, isn't it? This is about a lot of things, I replied. But yes, partly. He nodded slowly. Whatever it is, I'm with you. We drove separately to Cape May, Mark following my car along the Garden State Parkway. I had told him only that we needed 2 vehicles to transport everyone back. The November sky was a crisp, cloudless blue when we pulled into the winding drive that led to the gray Cape Cod with blue shutters, Denise's dream home, now mine. I parked beneath a massive oak tree and checked my watch. 20 minutes until everyone arrived. Perfect timing. The property manager met us at the door, handed me the keys, and discreetly departed. Mark stood on the gravel driveway, confusion etched across his features. Sophia, what is this place? I took his hand and led him up the steps to the wraparound porch. This, I said, unlocking the front door, is my second act. Inside, the house was everything the photos had promised: soaring ceilings, walls of windows framing Atlantic views, and hardwood floors that gleamed in the afternoon light. I had hired a decorator to furnish it minimally but elegantly, focusing on the living room and kitchen where today's reveal would occur. Mark walked from room to room in stunned silence, occasionally touching a surface, as if to confirm it was real. Finally, he turned to me. You bought this?
How?
When? Before I could answer, the crunch of tires on gravel announced our guests. I squeezed his hand. I'll explain everything, I promise. For now, just follow my lead. One by one, the cars arrived, Denise and her husband in their luxury sedan, Emily and her boyfriend in a compact, and Denise's sister and brother-in-law in their SUV. I stood on the porch, watching their faces as they emerged, confusion giving way to curiosity. Denise was the last to exit her car, her eyes locked on the house, recognition dawning slowly. When she finally stepped out, her hand went to her throat. That's the... She couldn't finish the sentence. I descended the steps to greet them, an envelope in my hand. Welcome, I called. I'm so glad you could all make it. Denise approached slowly, her gaze shifting between the house and me. Is this some kind of joke? I smiled warmly. Not at all. Won't you come inside? They followed me up the steps, a parade of bewildered faces. Inside, I had arranged a small spread of champagne and hors d'oeuvres on the kitchen island. The living room's floor-to-ceiling windows framed the ocean view like a living painting. Denise moved as if in a trance, touching the countertops, staring at the view. It's exactly like the pictures, she whispered. Is it finally on the market? I walked to her side and handed her the envelope containing a set of guest keys with a blue tassel, the same color as the shutters. Oh, it's not on the market anymore, I said, my voice carrying in the quiet room. I closed last week. Thought it'd be a nice weekend retreat for me and Mark. Denise's laugh was a sharp, disbelieving bark. That's not. You couldn't possibly. She looked to Mark for confirmation that this was an elaborate prank. Mark, still processing himself, simply shrugged. Apparently, my wife is full of surprises. But how? Denise insisted, her voice rising. This place was listed at. I know exactly what it was listed at, I interrupted gently. And what it sold for. I guided her to the living room, where the ocean stretched to the horizon. Come see the view. I believe you said the antique rocker would fit perfectly in the east corner. On cue, everyone turned to see the white rocker I'd placed exactly where Denise had described it would go in her dreams. It wasn't antique. I hadn't had time for that detail, but it was close enough to make the point. Denise's face cycled through emotions: shock, disbelief, a flash of anger, and finally, a sort of wary respect. "This isn't possible," she said flatly. "You closed your business. You've been unemployed for nearly 2 years." I gestured for everyone to take a seat in the living room. Denise remained standing, as if sitting would somehow legitimize what was happening. "That's what I wanted to tell all of you today," I began. "I never stopped working. I just stopped working visibly." Emily was the first to break the stunned silence. "Wait, you've had a secret job this whole time?" "Not a job," I corrected her. "A company. A very successful company." I outlined the basics, the rebrand, the international clients, the strategy that had allowed Eclipse Marketing Solutions to grow exponentially while I maintained my cover as a failed entrepreneur. With each detail, Denise's expression hardened. "Why the secrecy?" she finally asked. "Why let us think you'd failed?" I looked directly into her eyes. "Because sometimes it's better to be underestimated." She flinched slightly, recognition flickering across her face. Her own words twisted back at her. "So this," she gestured around the room, "this was all to what? Prove me wrong? Make me look foolish?" I shook my head. "No, Denise. This was to remind myself what I'm capable of. The fact that it happens to be your dream house is just serendipity." Denise laughed, a hollow, disbelieving sound that echoed through the vaulted ceiling. "Serendipity? You expect me to believe that you accidentally bought the exact house I've been talking about for years?" "No," I replied calmly, pouring champagne into flutes. "Nothing about this was accidental." I handed glasses to everyone except Denise, who waved hers away with a trembling hand. Her husband accepted his with a look that mixed embarrassment with something like respect. "Let me get this straight," Denise said, pacing the living room like a caged animal. "While we all thought you were licking your wounds after your business failure, you were secretly building a new company. And now you've used that money to what? Teach me a lesson?" Mark stepped forward. "Mom, I think—" "No," I interjected gently. "Let me answer." I set my glass down and faced my mother-in-law directly. "I didn't do this to teach you a lesson, Denise. I did this for me. Every time you called me a failure, every time you suggested I wasn't cut out for business, every time you implied that my only value was as Mark's wife, I channeled that into building something better than I had before." Emily whistled low. "Damn, Sophia. That's some serious revenge planning." "It's not revenge," I corrected, though the satisfaction coursing through me suggested otherwise. "It's reclamation. Of my narrative. Of my confidence. Of what I knew I was capable of all along." I crossed to a side table and picked up a leather portfolio embossed with the Eclipse Marketing Solutions logo, a stylized E formed by negative space around a sun. I handed it to Denise. "My company's latest financials. Last year's tax returns. Client testimonials. Press coverage that never mentioned my name because I requested anonymity." I paused. "And the deed to this house." Denise took the portfolio, but didn't open it. Her face had gone pale, making her carefully applied blush stand out like fever spots. "This is—" She struggled for words. "This is unnecessarily theatrical." "Perhaps," I acknowledged. But then again, so was raising a toast to real success stories in the family while pointedly excluding me. A heavy silence fell. Denise's husband coughed uncomfortably. "Maybe we should give them some privacy," Emily's boyfriend suggested, already backing toward the door. "No," Denise said sharply. "There's nothing private about this." Sophia clearly wanted an audience. She finally opened the portfolio, flipping through pages with increasing agitation. When she reached the financial statements, her eyes widened slightly. "7 figures?" she whispered, almost to herself. "That's not possible." "Not only possible," I replied. "Verified by 3 different accounting firms. One of which, ironically, is the same firm you've worked at for 30 years. That hit home. Denise snapped the portfolio shut, her composure cracking. "So what now? You've made your point. You've humiliated me in front of my family. Are you satisfied?" I moved to the east-facing windows, where the antique-style rocker stood. "I'm not trying to humiliate you, Denise. Believe it or not, this isn't about you. Then why buy this house? My dream house. I ran my hand along the smooth wooden arm of the rocker. Because every time you talked about this house, this view, this porch, it was always framed as something I could never achieve. Something only possible through your kind of stability, your kind of planning, your kind of success. I met her gaze. I wanted to prove to myself that there are different paths to the same destination. Mark joined me by the window, his arms sliding around my waist in silent support. Mom, Sophia didn't do this to hurt you. She did it because you hurt her repeatedly for nearly 2 years. Denise's eyes filled with tears, whether from anger or genuine emotion. I couldn't tell. So what happens now? She asked, voice barely audible. You flaunt your success and your house, and I'm supposed to what? Apologize? Congratulate you? Pretend this isn't the most calculated, vindictive. Now, I interrupted. We have champagne. We enjoy the view. And tomorrow, we all go back to our lives with a slightly better understanding of each other. I gestured toward the kitchen. I've prepared lunch. Nothing elaborate, just sandwiches and salad. After that, you're all welcome to explore the property. The beach access is private, down those wooden steps. I pointed through the window to a winding staircase that descended the dune to the shoreline. Denise remained frozen, the portfolio clutched against her chest like armor. And one more thing, I added. You're all welcome here anytime. The guest rooms are on the second floor, east and west wings. The master suite takes up the third floor. I looked directly at Denise. This might be my house now, but that doesn't mean it can't still be part of your dream. Just on different terms. The family exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure how to proceed in this new reality where power dynamics had shifted so dramatically. Emily was the first to break the tension, raising her glass. Well, I for one am impressed as hell. To Sophia's secret empire. One by one, everyone except Denise raised their glasses. Mark squeezed my hand, a mix of pride and concern in his eyes. Denise finally moved, setting the portfolio down with deliberate care. She walked to the kitchen island, picked up the champagne flute she had previously refused, and turned to face me. You've certainly proven me wrong, she said, voice steady despite the storm in her eyes. About many things. She raised her glass slightly. Not quite a toast, but an acknowledgement. I never thought you had it in you, she added, a final barb wrapped in admission. I smiled, genuine for the first time in her presence. That, Denise, was exactly the point. The weeks following the Cape May revelation unfolded in a series of subtle shifts. No grand apologies or dramatic confrontations, just the quiet rearrangement of family dynamics like furniture being slowly repositioned in a familiar room. Denise never said, "I'm sorry," directly. Those words would have cost her more than she was willing to pay. But her silence spoke volumes. The snide comments disappeared. The backhanded compliments evaporated. The smug smiles were replaced with something more guarded, more cautious. The first test came at Christmas dinner, hosted at Mark's sister's apartment. I arrived braced for tension, but Denise greeted me with a stiff nod and a store-bought bottle of wine. "I thought you might like this," she said, handing me the Cabernet. The sommelier said it pairs well with success. It wasn't an olive branch exactly, but it wasn't a barb either. I accepted it with a smile. "Thank you, Denise. That's thoughtful." Throughout dinner, she watched me with the wary respect one might give a house cat they'd just discovered was actually a panther. When someone asked about my work, she remained conspicuously silent, sipping her wine and studying my face as I gave carefully edited answers about marketing consulting. After dessert, as we gathered in the living room, Denise's sister brought up the Cape May house. "Will you be spending New Year's there, Sophia?" Before I could answer, Denise interjected. "The view of the fireworks over the ocean is spectacular." She hesitated, then added, "Or so I've heard." I recognized the opening for what it was. "We haven't made plans yet. You're all welcome to join us if you'd like." A moment of surprised silence followed. Mark squeezed my knee approvingly. That would be. Denise searched for the right word. Nice. We did spend New Year's Eve at the beach house, all of us together in a truce as fragile as the champagne flutes we raised at midnight. Denise admired the antique rocker I'd found to replace the reproduction, a piece offering I'd arranged, without commentary. She sat in it while watching the fireworks, her silhouette against the window a portrait of things unsaid. January brought a heavy snowstorm that blanketed the Northeast. I received a text from Denise, the first direct communication initiated by her since Thanksgiving. "The Cape House weathering the storm okay?" I sent her the security camera footage of waves crashing dramatically against the seawall, the house standing firm above. Her response was simple, built to last. It felt like acknowledgement of more than just architecture. By spring, a new pattern had emerged. Family gatherings continued, but the power dynamic had permanently shifted. Denise no longer held court unchallenged. Her opinions were offered more tentatively, with sideways glances in my direction. In April, Mark received a major promotion, division director, with a substantial salary increase. Denise hosted a small celebration dinner. "To my brilliant son," she toasted, then paused. Meeting my eyes across the table, she added, "and to Sophia, whose business acumen clearly runs in the family now." It wasn't exactly warm, but it was honest, an admission that I belonged in the circle of success she so valued. After dinner, she cornered me in the kitchen while I was rinsing dishes. "You never told anyone at my firm about your company," she said. It wasn't a question. I placed a wineglass carefully in the drying rack.
"No."
"You could have. It would have embarrassed me. That wasn't my goal." She studied me with new eyes. "What exactly was your goal, Sophia?" I turned to face her fully. "To succeed on my own terms. To build something I was proud of. And yes, to prove you wrong but not to hurt you. Just to correct the record." She nodded slowly. "Fair enough." She picked up a dish towel and began drying the glasses I'd washed. "The beach house. Are you keeping it?" "Yes," I replied. "It's a good investment." "It is," she agreed. Then, after a pause, "Thank you for not changing the rocker." It was as close to vulnerability as I'd ever seen from her. I spent many weekends at the Cape House that summer, sometimes alone, sometimes with Mark, occasionally with the whole family. I converted the third-floor loft into my office, where I could work while watching the ocean breathe against the shoreline. One morning in August, I sat on the porch with my coffee, the sun just beginning its climb over the Atlantic. The beach was empty except for a few early joggers and someone walking a golden retriever along the water's edge. In that moment of perfect solitude, I realized what I'd really bought with this house. Not revenge, but freedom. Freedom from seeking approval. Freedom from measuring my worth through others' eyes. Freedom to define success by my own standards. I had paid an exorbitant price for that lesson, financially and emotionally. But as I sat in the peace of that porch, listening to the rhythm of waves against sand, I knew it had been worth every penny. That evening, I received a text from Denise. "Planning Thanksgiving at my place again this year. Unless you'd prefer to host at the beach." I smiled at the phone. Not an apology. Not quite friendship. But respect. Hard-earned and genuine. I typed my reply. "Let's do it at the beach. Time for a new tradition." Her response came quickly. "I'll bring the turkey." Sometimes victory isn't found in grand confrontations or public vindication. Sometimes it's found in the small moments of recognition, in the absence of barbs, in the presence of newfound respect. Let them underestimate you. Let them dismiss your ambitions and mock your setbacks. Let them believe whatever narrative makes them comfortable. Just make sure you're the one holding the keys in the end.